My name is Eleanor. I'm 76 years old now, and I've lived through more than my fair share of storms. I used to believe that the worst things in life came like hurricanes, loud, fast, and sudden. But the truth is, some storms come silently, some betrayals unfold slowly, like a shadow creeping across the floor. Mine began the day I was told I had cancer, and that same year, I lost the person I thought would stand beside me through it all, my husband of over 40 years. I was born and raised in a small town in Kentucky. Life wasn't fancy, but it was honest. I met Harold, my husband, at a church picnic when I was just 21. He had a smile that could light up a room and a way of making everyone feel like they mattered. I remember thinking to myself, he's the one, and for a long time, I truly believed that we built a life together, 2 kids, a little white house, Sunday dinners, family vacations, nothing extravagant, but it was ours. It was good. People say marriage is about partnership, about being there for each other, in sickness and in health. That promise, the one we repeat in front of friends and family, held on to it like a sacred truth. So when I found a lump in my breast one winter morning, Harold was the first person I told. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, and whispered, "I need you to come with me to the doctor." He nodded, held my hand, and kissed my forehead. "Of course, sweetheart," he said. "We'll get through this together." That was the last time I ever truly felt his support. The diagnosis came fast and hard. Stage 2 breast cancer. It wasn't the worst news a doctor could deliver, but it shattered my world just the same. Chemotherapy started quickly. I lost my hair, my appetite, my energy. But worse than all that, I started to feel like I was losing myself. I wasn't Eleanor, the wife, the mom, the warm-hearted grandmother who baked cookies and remembered everyone's birthdays. I became a patient, a burden. Harold changed. At first, it was subtle. He stopped sitting with me during treatments. He'd drop me off and say he had errands to run. He started sleeping in the guest room, said it was because he didn't want to disturb me. He missed my appointments. He forgot to pick up my meds. One day, I asked him if he still loved me. He just stared at me, said nothing, and walked out of the room. I was too exhausted to fight. My body was at war, and my soul was breaking. I remember, one night in particular, I had just thrown up from another round of chemo. I was on the bathroom floor, cold, weak, and crying. I called for him. He didn't come. I dragged myself to bed and found him asleep on the couch downstairs, snoring peacefully like nothing was wrong. That's when I knew he had already left me, long before he physically walked out the door. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself he was scared, that he didn't know how to handle seeing me like that, that maybe if I just got better, things would return to normal. But cancer changes. More than your body, it exposes truths. It shines a light into dark corners of your life you didn't even know existed. One morning, I found a text on his phone, a message from a woman named Susan. It wasn't innocent, it wasn't brief, and it wasn't the first. I read dozens of them while sitting in the living room with my IV-4 bag still attached to my arm. My heart broke in ways that not even the cancer could explain. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He just said, "I needed something normal, something happy. You're always sick. It's depressing." I wish I could say I kicked him out then and there. I wish I could say I found strength and moved on. But the truth is, I stayed. I stayed because I was terrified of facing the fight alone. I stayed because I still loved the man I married, even if he didn't exist anymore. So this is where my story begins, not with cancer, but with betrayal. Not with sickness, but with silence. This isn't just a story about a woman who survived illness. It's a story about a woman who survived abandonment. A woman who rebuilt her life piece by piece when the one person who vowed to stand beside her walked away. If you're watching this and you've ever felt alone in your pain, please know, I see you. I've been you. And you are not alone. "I'm not going anywhere," he said to me, holding my hand the night after my diagnosis. I remember that moment with painful clarity. Robert stood at the edge of our bed while I sat hunched over, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. His voice was steady, his eyes looked into mine, and he said those words as if they were a vow. "We'll get through this together." And I believed him. Of course I did. We had been married for 33 years. We'd raised 2 daughters. We'd lost his father together. We'd lost my sister. We'd even lost our first baby in a miscarriage in the early years of our marriage. But we had always weathered the storms. He was my rock. Or so I thought. In those first few days, he seemed committed. He helped organize a schedule for doctor appointments. He cooked dinner when I was too tired. He'd even kissed the top of my head and call me his fighter. But then something began to shift. At first it was subtle. A missed appointment here. A forgotten medication pickup there. He started sleeping in later, coming home later, and going out more. He said it was just stress, that seeing me so sick was hard on him. I tried to be understanding. Cancer doesn't just affect the patient, it affects the whole family. I knew that. I told myself that his distance was just his way of coping. Some men can't handle emotions. Some hide behind silence. But what I didn't understand was why he stopped looking at me the same way. After my mastectomy, my body changed. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The scars across my chest, the hollow where my breast had been, it broke me. I cried silently in the shower more times than I can count. I needed Robert more than ever, not for grand gestures, but just for reassurance, for touch, for presence, for love. Instead, I got excuses. I've got a meeting tonight. Traffic was crazy. I need some air. And then the nights began. Long nights alone. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and realize he wasn't in bed. Sometimes he was on the couch. Sometimes he was gone altogether. I asked him once, "Where were you?" And he snapped, "Why do you always assume the worst?" That question haunted me. Because, at the time, I wasn't assuming the worst. I still trusted him, even when he started turning off his phone more often, even when he changed his passcode, even when I saw the credit card statement with a dinner for two at a restaurant we hadn't visited in years. I told myself not to go there, not to think that he could, that he would, cheat. Not now. Not while I was bald, weak, and fighting for my life. No man could be that cruel, right? There was a moment, one of the worst moments of my life, when I realized just how naive I had been. It was a Sunday morning. I had just gotten home from a follow-up appointment. Robert had refused to go, saying he had a headache. I came home early, hoping to surprise him with coffee and pastries from the cafe down the street. But it was me who got the surprise. There was a woman in my kitchen. She wasn't some stranger. She was someone I'd met before. Woman from our church's volunteer group, younger than me, with long red hair, and a laugh that always made me feel invisible. And there she was, leaning over my stove, laughing with my husband. When they saw me, silence filled the room. Robert looked like a child caught stealing candy. She just looked smug. "I was just dropping something off," she said quickly. Robert didn't say a word, not to explain, not to deny. He just stood there like a coward. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, numb. The betrayal wasn't confirmed, not out loud, but I knew. He promised to be there. But instead, he was entertaining another woman while I fought for my life. I thought cancer would be the hardest thing I'd ever face. But I was wrong. Being abandoned while you're sick, by the one person who vowed to stand beside you. That's a different kind of pain. And that was only the beginning. If I could describe what it feels like to lose someone who's still alive and living under the same roof, I would say it's like drowning in slow motion. You scream, but the water muffles your voice. You flail, but no one reaches out. That's how it felt with Robert after that day in the kitchen. He never admitted to anything, not once. I confronted him gently at first. I asked him why she was there. I asked him if there was something going on between them. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're imagining things. You've been under a lot of stress." And just like that, he flipped it on me. Made me question my instincts, made me feel like the illness was clouding my mind. That was the first time I realized the man I had loved for 3 decades was capable of gaslighting me while I was fighting cancer. But the real pain came afterward, not in shouts, but in silence. He stopped talking to me unless it was necessary. No good mornings, no checking on how I was feeling after treatments. He would leave the house without a word and come back smelling like cologne he never used around me. He became a stranger, cold, detached. The man who once rubbed my feet after long shifts on my nursing job now looked annoyed if I asked for a glass of water. The distance wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. He stopped sleeping beside me. At first, he claimed I needed space to recover, that he didn't want to disturb my rest, but I knew it was more than that. He didn't want to be near me, didn't want to see what cancer was doing to my body. I was no longer the woman he married. And in his eyes, I was now broken, unattractive, disposable. I remember one night in particular. I had just finished my 4th round of chemo, my body was aching, and I was so weak I could barely walk. I stood at the bedroom door and begged him to just sit with me for a while. I told him I was scared. He looked up from his phone and said, "You'll be fine, just rest." That was it. He turned his eyes back to the screen and left me to cry myself to sleep. The house became a silent battlefield. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock, the creaking of floorboards, and the distant clinking of cutlery when he ate his meals alone in the kitchen. My daughters tried to help, but I never told them the full story. I didn't want to ruin their image of their father, and I still held on to some twisted hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd come around. But instead, the more vulnerable I became, the farther he drifted. He started locking his phone, leaving the house for errands that took hours, smiling at texts that came in at midnight. I saw it all. I knew it in my gut, but I was too tired to sick to do anything about it. One afternoon, I found a receipt in the laundry, a hotel room, just 30 minutes away. It wasn't even subtle. Held it in my trembling hands and felt my knees go weak. I sat on the bathroom floor and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. But even then, I didn't confront him. Why? Because I still loved him. Because part of me hoped he'd feel guilty, that he'd see what he was doing and stop. But he never did. Instead, he grew colder, more distant. He treated me like an inconvenience, a chore, as if my illness was something I had done to him. He stopped going to church with me, stopped calling me honey, stopped existing in my world entirely, even though he was physically still there. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, was the loneliness, to fight for your life and have no one to hold your hand. That kind of loneliness breaks something in you. I didn't just lose my health. I lost my partner, my friend, my marriage, and yet I smiled through it when friends visited. I wore a wig to hide my shame. I laughed at jokes, even though my heart was screaming, because society teaches women to suffer quietly, especially older women, especially wives. But I made a decision then. If I survived the cancer, I wouldn't let the silence kill me too. Hospitals have a unique kind of silence, one that doesn't come from peace, but from pain. It's a stillness that lingers in white walls, fluorescent lights, and the steady beep of machines. I remember that silence clearly, because I laid in it for weeks. And Robert wasn't there. When my body became too weak from chemotherapy to manage at home, my doctor admitted me. My white blood cell count had plummeted. I was fighting fevers daily, and I could barely keep food down. The nurses were kind. The staff was attentive, but the chair next to my bed, the one where a husband should sit, remained empty. Robert knew I was being admitted. I had told him the day before. I even packed my overnight bag slowly, hoping he'd offer to drive me, or at least ask if I needed anything. But instead, he said, "You'll be in good hands." Then, he went to take a shower and never mentioned it again. My daughter Emily was the one who drove me. She held my hand the whole ride there and told me, "Mom, everything's going to be okay." I smiled at her and nodded, pretending to believe her. But inside, I felt more alone than ever. The first night in that hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling and waited. I thought maybe Robert would show up with flowers, or a book, or just a familiar face. But he didn't. Not that night. Not the next. Not even a phone call. Instead, I got a text 2 days later. "Sorry, got tied up. How are you?" How was I? I was bruised from IVs. I was vomiting every few hours. My bones ached, and my heart was crumbling. I didn't reply. My daughters came in shifts, Emily in the mornings, Rachel in the evenings. They helped feed me, read to me, brushed my thinning hair. But each day, they'd ask, "Is Dad coming today?" And I'd make up another excuse. "He's busy. He had to fix the car. He's not feeling well." I lied to protect them from the truth. That their father was disappearing from my life, one excuse at a time. There was one night, a particularly bad one, when my fever spiked to 104. Nurses surrounded me, placing cold compresses on my body. I remember drifting in and out of consciousness, hearing the word infection, and thinking to myself, I might not wake up tomorrow. And in that terrifying moment, I didn't think about death. I thought about Robert, about how I might die without him ever saying goodbye, without him ever apologizing. But I did wake up. Fever broke. My body, battered as it was, held on, and still, he didn't come. On the 5th day, a nurse walked in with a bouquet of flowers. I perked up for a moment, thinking maybe, just maybe they were from him. They weren't. They were from a woman I hadn't seen in years, a kind gesture from someone who had no obligation to care. But Robert, not a word. I began to think about our vows, in sickness and in health. What do those words mean when sickness comes and your partner disappears? One afternoon, Emily brought my mail from home. As I was sorting through it, a receipt fell out of a folded envelope. It wasn't even addressed to me. It was from a jewelry store. I opened it out of curiosity and, my hands began to shake. It was a receipt for a gold necklace, engraved, with initials that weren't mine, the purchase date, the day I was admitted. That moment broke something in me that hadn't yet shattered. I realized he hadn't just failed me. He had replaced me while I lay in a hospital bed fighting for my life. I pressed the call button for the nurse, asked for a wheelchair, and rolled myself to the hospital chapel. I didn't pray for healing. I didn't even pray for him. I prayed for strength, to walk away if I lived. Because love that only lasts through health isn't love at all. It's convenience. And I deserved more than convenience. I deserved loyalty. That hospital became the place where I decided, if I made it out alive, I wouldn't return to a home that made me feel dead inside. There's a strange kind of heartbreak that happens when fantasy becomes fact, when the little voice in your head, whispering he's cheating, is suddenly proven right. It's not just pain. It's humiliation. It's rage. And worst of all, it's confirmation that you were never crazy. You were just being lied to. I found out her name by accident. After my hospital stay, I returned home, not stronger, but different. Something had hardened inside me. My heart had grown quiet. I no longer searched Robert's eyes for love. I didn't wait up for him anymore. I stopped asking where he was going, because by then, I already knew he was going to her. But I still didn't know who she was. Not until the day I found the card. It was a week after I got home. I was sitting at the dining table sorting bills when a small envelope slipped from the stack. No address, no postage, just our last names scrawled across the front. Inside was a folded card that smelled faintly of perfume. It read, "Thank you for the necklace. I haven't taken it off since you gave it to me. Love always, Lisa, Lisa. It was like swallowing glass. The name itself was harmless, ordinary, even, but the context burned through me like acid. Lisa was real. Not a shadow, not a suspicion. She was a woman, with a name, a scent, a handwriting that curled into hearts, and she had been close enough to him to thank him in person for jewelry, while I was lying in a hospital bed hooked up to IVs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march into the living room and throw the card at him and demand answers, but I didn't. I sat there in silence, my hands shaking, tears welling up in my eyes, staring at that name like it was a curse. I tucked the card under a pile of old receipts. I didn't confront him, at least not yet. Not because I was scared, but because I was done being the one who begged for crumbs of truth. That night, he came home late again. Same excuse. Got stuck at the office. He smelled of cologne and cheap wine. He didn't even make eye contact when he walked past me. I whispered to myself, "Lisa." Suddenly, I could see everything clearly. She was probably the one he texted during dinner. The reason he started going to conferences. The woman who got his attention, his affection, his energy while I got silence and sighs. The pieces of the puzzle fit together far too easily. I remembered how, weeks earlier, he had canceled my oncology appointment last minute because he was too swamped at work. That same day, my friend Marcia mentioned she saw him at a coffee shop, with a redhead. At the time, I dismissed it. I even defended him. But now I knew. Lisa wasn't a mistake. She was a choice. And I was the one he left behind in sickness, in vulnerability, in need. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, replaying every lie he ever told. Every time he said, "You're imagining things." Every time he said, "There's nothing going on." Every time he kissed my forehead like a husband, and then kissed her like a lover. The next morning, I did something I never thought I would do. I followed him. I waited until he left for work, got in my daughter's car, and drove a few streets behind him. My heart pounded the entire time. I felt like a teenager snooping, but I had to see it for myself. He didn't go to work. He pulled into a small house on the outskirts of town. Neat garden, white fence, flowers in the window. I watched him knock on the door, and Lisa answered, threw her arms around his neck and kissed him like she'd done it 100 times before. And he let her. I didn't stay. I didn't need to. I drove home on autopilot, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my eyes wet with betrayal. But my spirit somehow felt stronger, because the guessing game was over. The illusions were shattered. Lisa had a name, and now I had clarity. Robert wasn't the man I thought he was. Maybe he never had been. And from that day on, I stopped waiting for him to come back, because he had already left me. He just forgot to take his things. Asterisk, you know what hurts even more than betrayal? Realizing that everyone else saw it coming but no one warned you. For weeks after I discovered the card from Lisa and followed Robert to her house, I kept thinking maybe I was the only one who had missed the signs. But as I started piecing things together, another truth emerged, and this one cut even deeper. People knew, people around me, friends, neighbors, even some of my own family had their suspicions, and yet they said nothing. It started with Marcia. Marcia had been my friend since our early 30s. We used to walk together every Sunday afternoon, trading, gossip, and stories about our kids. She was the kind of friend who brought chicken soup when you were sick and remembered your wedding anniversary better than your husband did. After my first chemo session, those walks stopped. I was too tired, too weak, but she still came by to check on me. Less and less over time, but she came. One afternoon, she dropped off a small basket of fruit and sat with me at the kitchen table. She looked like she wanted to say something, fidgeting with the edge of her coat. "Marcia," I said gently, "is there something you want to tell me?" She sighed. "Helen, I didn't want to be the one. I didn't think it was my place, but I've seen Robert with her more than once." I felt like the floor was tilting under me. "With Lisa?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded. "They were at the cafe downtown a few weeks ago, laughing, holding hands. I thought, maybe they were just friends, but then someone else mentioned it too." "Someone else who?" I asked. She hesitated. "Well, Susan and Margaret. And I think even your neighbor, Ellen, saw something once." I sat back in my chair, stunned. My closest friends, the women I had baked pies with, cried with, prayed with, they knew. They had seen him out with Lisa while I was sick, while I was lying in bed, losing my hair, throwing up from chemo, and praying to stay alive for another year. I wasn't just betrayed by Robert. I was betrayed by silence. The next Sunday at church, I saw Susan. She gave me that smile, tight-lipped, pitying, and I suddenly saw through it. I saw the way she looked at me, like I was fragile, like I was stupid, like she knew something I didn't. And that's when it hit me. They weren't protecting me by staying quiet. They were protecting him. They didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to cause drama. They didn't want to be blamed for breaking the truth to a sick woman. So they smiled, brought casseroles, sent cards, but they said nothing. I felt humiliated, like a fool at the center of a play everyone else had seen the script for. The looks people gave me, they weren't new. I just finally understood what they meant. And then, there were the whispers. Once I started showing up against a grocery store, to church, to local gatherings. Noticed the hush that fell when I entered a room. I noticed the way women touched my arm a little too gently. The way men avoided eye contact. It was as if I was some tragic figure, the woman who got cheated on while battling cancer. People pitied me, and that pity tasted more bitter than anger ever could, because I didn't want pity. I wanted honesty. I wanted just one person, one friend, one family member to sit me down and say, "Helen, something's wrong. You deserve the truth." But no one did. Even my daughter, Emily, later admitted, "Mom, I had a weird feeling, but I thought I was just being paranoid." I wanted to be furious with her, but I couldn't. She's my baby. She didn't know what to do. And honestly, what would she have said? That her father was sneaking around with another woman while her mother was dying in slow motion? No one wants to believe that about their own parents. So instead, they all just waited, watched, and let me walk blind through a fire they all saw coming. That kind of loneliness doesn't go away easily, even after I had confirmation. Even after I'd followed him. Even after I had Marcia's reluctant truth. I still had to face the world alone. The friends I thought I had weren't there for me. The husband I trusted had replaced me, and the town I lived in had quietly turned its back. But here's what surprised me most. That betrayal, it didn't break me. It changed me. I learned to stop looking outward for truth and start trusting my own voice again. The one that had screamed, "Something is wrong," for months. The one I had ignored. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't making it up. I was just being lied to. and everyone else went along with it. But no more. People love to ask, "Why did you stay?" They ask it with judgment in their voice, with eyebrows raised like staying makes you weak, like love is black and white, like betrayal is always enough to make you run. But when you've built a life with someone, a real, tangled, messy, beautiful, and broken life, it's never that simple. I didn't stay because I was naive. I didn't stay because I didn't know how to leave. I stayed because, for a long time, I believed in redemption. I believed people could change. I believed that maybe, just maybe, the man who once whispered forever into my ear was still in there somewhere, buried beneath layers of fear, shame, and failure. You see, Robert wasn't always a bad husband. We had years, decades of laughter, raising children, long road trips, birthday breakfasts in bed. He held me when I cried over my father's death. He worked overtime so I could finish nursing school. He rubbed my swollen feet during pregnancy. He kissed my forehead every night for years. So when I got sick and he began to drift, I didn't immediately jump to conclusions. I made excuses. I rationalized. I told myself, he's scared. He doesn't know how to handle this. And maybe that was true. For a time, but the affair, that was a choice. A selfish one. And yet, I still stayed. After I confronted him, yes, I finally did. He looked at me with guilt in his eyes. Not denial, not anger, just guilt. And I saw something else, fear. "Do you love her?" I asked. He paused, then shook his head. "I don't know." That was the most honest thing he'd said to me in months. We sat in silence for a long time. And then, he broke down, sobbed into his hands. He said things like, "I didn't know how to be strong for you. And I felt invisible when everything became about the cancer." As if that justified it. It didn't, but it explained it. And I'll be honest, I wasn't ready to start a war. I was still recovering. I had just finished my 4th round of chemo. I was tired, fragile, my hair was thinning, my skin was gray, my spirit was worn. I didn't have the strength to pack a bag and walk out of my own house. So, I stayed. For stability, for routine, for the quiet moments when I could pretend things were normal. And because part of me still hoped he'd fight for me. He promised to end it with Lisa. Said he already had. He deleted her number in front of me. Changed his phone password. Swore he'd be better. And for a while, he tried. He started cooking dinner again. He came to my doctor's appointments. He asked about my pain levels, about my sleep. He even kissed me goodnight softly like the old days. But do you want to know the truth? It never felt the same. Because once trust is broken, it doesn't heal like a scraped knee. It's more like a shattered plate. You can glue it together, but the cracks will always show. Every time he came home late, I wondered. Every time he smiled at his phone, I panicked. Every time he touched me, I flinched just a little. That's what betrayal does. It stays with you. Even in forgiveness, the fear lingers. Some days, I hated him. Other days, I hated myself for still wanting him to love me. And yet, I stayed. Because when you're fighting for your life, you cling to anything that feels solid, even if it's cracked. Even if it's temporary. I remember one night in particular, maybe 2 months after the confrontation, he brought me chamomile tea and sat beside me on the couch. We didn't speak. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. And then he whispered, "I don't deserve you." And in my head, I answered, "You're right." But I didn't say it out loud, because part of me still clung to the man I married, the man who once danced with me in the kitchen barefoot at midnight. The man who wrote me love letters when we were young and broke. The man who held our daughter for the first time and cried. I stayed for the memory of that man. Not the one sitting beside me now. But memories aren't enough. They don't tuck you in at night. They don't wipe away tears. They don't say sorry with their whole chest. And as the days went on, I started to realize that staying didn't mean saving. Staying didn't mean healing. Staying didn't mean he loved me the way I deserved it. Just meant I wasn't ready to leave. Yet. It didn't happen during the shouting, not during the nights of silence or the awkward dinners where our forks were louder than our words. No, it wasn't one big moment that broke me. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. I had just returned from a follow-up appointment with my oncologist. The results were promising. My cancer was in remission. My body had fought back. I should have been crying tears of joy. Instead, I came home to an empty kitchen, cold coffee in the pot, and a man who didn't even ask how my appointment went. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. His face didn't light up when I walked in. No embrace. No, how did it go, Helen? Just silence, and that was it. That was the moment. It wasn't about Lisa anymore, or the lies, or the years of infidelity. It was about the man sitting there, so far away from the one I had loved, that I no longer recognized him. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, took off my coat, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, not just from cancer, but from everything. From carrying the weight of a marriage that had died long before my diagnosis, from pretending, from hoping, from staying, and suddenly, I whispered aloud, to my reflection, I don't deserve this. The words hit me harder than anything Robert ever said, because it wasn't just a complaint, it was a declaration. I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve to be invisible, to be betrayed, to be made to feel like a burden while I was fighting for my life. That same night, I packed a small suitcase, just clothes, toiletries, and one photo, our wedding day. I stared at it for a long time before tucking it inside the front pocket. I didn't leave a dramatic note, no slamming of doors, just a quiet exit. I went to stay with Emily, our daughter. She opened the door and didn't ask a single question. She just held me like I had once held her through scraped knees and broken hearts, and I sobbed for hours, for everything, for the love that died, for the woman I used to be, for the years wasted trying to save a man who didn't want to be saved. The next morning, Robert called, once. Then again, I didn't answer. When he texted, all he wrote was, "Please come home. I'm sorry." But sorry had lost its meaning. I had heard it after the first lie, after the first card, after the first time I caught him sneaking in late. Sorry was no longer a promise, it was a stall, a way to avoid consequences. I needed more than sorry. I needed peace, so I stayed with Emily. At first it was supposed to be temporary, just a week or two, but as the days passed, something shifted. I started breathing again, sleeping without nightmares, laughing at silly things on TV. Emily and I talked late into the night. She told me stories from her childhood I had forgotten, and she told me something I never expected. Mom, I always knew you were strong, but I never saw you this free. That word wrapped itself around my heart like a warm blanket. Free from the guilt, free from the performance, free from the performance, free from the ache of waiting for a man who had already left emotionally years before. Robert tried. He came to the house, sent flowers, left voicemails, even cried once on the front porch, begging me to give him another chance. But by then, it was too late, because I had tasted something better than reconciliation. I had tasted dignity, and I wasn't willing to give it up again. One night, I called him. My voice didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. "I'm not coming back," I said. "Not because I hate you, but because I love myself more now." He didn't argue. He knew. That was the last time we spoke for months. And during that time, something beautiful happened. I started writing again, little reflections in a journal. I joined a women's support group, other women who had survived not just cancer, but betrayal, abandonment, emotional neglect. I wasn't alone, and every time I told my story, another woman opened up and said, "Me too." That's when I realized this pain wasn't my prison. It was my platform. I had been through the storm, and I was still standing. After so many years of being Robert's wife, the cancer patient, the woman who stayed, I had forgotten who I really was. I don't mean that in a poetic sense, I mean it literally. I had spent so many years molding myself to other people's expectations, so much time suppressing my own needs to keep a marriage afloat, that when I finally walked away, I didn't know what I liked, what I wanted, or even what made me happy. The first few days at Emily's house felt strange, not bad, just unfamiliar. I didn't have to set the table for two. I didn't have to pretend to sleep to avoid another cold night next to a man who had betrayed me. I didn't have to smile through small talk with church ladies who probably knew more about my life than I did. But I also didn't know what to do with myself. It was like waking up from a long coma. For weeks, I just sat with it. The quiet, the stillness. I let myself feel every bit of the pain I had buried under decades of being strong. I cried, not just tears, but the kind of deep, guttural sobs that shake your whole body and make your chest ache, the kind of cries you hold back for years, until one day you can't anymore. Emily never rushed me. She didn't offer platitudes. She just held space for me, and slowly, the fog started to lift. One morning, I went outside and sat on her porch. I had a cup of coffee, just the way I like it, black, with a pinch of cinnamon. The birds were chirping. The sun was warm on my face, and I thought, this is mine, not the coffee, not the porch, but the moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing. I wasn't managing someone else's feelings. I wasn't hoping someone would finally notice I was drowning. I was simply being. From there, I started doing little things, small acts of self-reclamation. I went to the store and bought a new journal. The cover was bright blue, the color of hope. I began writing in it every morning, not long, essays, just thoughts, feelings, prayers, sometimes one sentence, sometimes 5 pages. I started cooking again, not for anyone else, but for me. I tried new recipes. I burned a few meals, laughed at myself, and tried again. It felt good to enjoy food again without someone judging my portions or criticizing the seasoning. Then I got a haircut. I know that might sound insignificant, but for me, it was huge. After chemo, I had lost so much of my hair. When it grew back, I kept it in a simple bun, always practical, always tucked away. But now, I let it down. I went to a salon one I had never been to before, and I told the stylist, I want something that feels like a beginning. She gave me soft waves that framed my face. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Me, the version of me before the pain, before the betrayals, before the sickness stole my spirit. But the most powerful thing I did, I forgave myself. I stopped blaming myself for staying, for not seeing the signs sooner, for wanting so desperately to believe in a love that no longer existed. I forgave the woman. I was the one who clung to the hope that Robert would change, who endured lonely nights and forced smiles, because she didn't want to disrupt her world. She did what she could with what she had. And now, I was someone else. Someone braver. Someone wiser. Someone more whole. Not because life had been kind, but because I had chosen healing. I started walking every morning, just 20 minutes through the neighborhood. I'd smile at strangers, sometimes tear up as I passed happy couples. But I always came home feeling stronger. I joined a support group for women who had experienced emotional betrayal during chronic illness. The stories there made me feel less alone and, in some strange way, less broken. There was power in being seen. One day, one of the women in the group said something I'll never forget. She looked at me and said, "You wear your survival like a crown, Helen. You don't even know it yet." And in that moment, I realized I had spent so long hiding my pain, thinking it was something to be ashamed of. But now, it was a part of my armor, not something to bury, but something to honor. I wasn't just a woman who had been betrayed. I was a woman who had survived. I had faced death, faced abandonment, faced the unraveling of a 40-year marriage, and I was still standing, stronger, freer, whole, and for the first time in a long time, I looked in the mirror and smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally come home to myself. It had been nearly 6 months since I walked out of that house, the same house where we built our life together, and in all that time, Robert and I hadn't spoken more than a few words through our daughter. I needed that distance. I needed to breathe without his shadow nearby. Then one day, I got a letter in the mail, not a text, not an email, a handwritten letter. The envelope was plain, no return address, just my name, in that familiar handwriting, the same handwriting that used to scribble love notes on napkins and leave messages on the bathroom mirror. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was from Robert. It began simply, "Helen, I don't expect you to forgive me, but there are things I need to say, things I should have said a long time ago." I sat down slowly, heart pounding, unsure if I wanted to know what came next. But something in me, curiosity, pain, maybe the ghost of love, pushed me to keep reading. He wrote about everything, how he felt helpless when I was diagnosed, how instead of leaning in, he ran, how Lisa wasn't about love, but about escaping the pain he didn't know how to hold. He admitted the affair had started months before my diagnosis, something I had suspected but never confirmed. And it hit me harder than I expected, knowing that even before my body began to break, his loyalty already had. He wrote, "I was weak, and when you needed me most, I failed. You were fighting for your life, and I was chasing distraction." He said he didn't realize what he had until I was gone, that the silence of the house haunted him, that he saw me in every corner, that he missed the way I hummed while folding laundry, the way I brewed his coffee just right, the way I still smiled at him, even after everything. But the part that broke me was this: you gave me grace when I deserved rage. You gave me loyalty when I gave you betrayal. And I didn't deserve a minute of your love, but you gave me years. I'm sorry, Helen, not for losing you, but for destroying you long before you left. I wept, not because I was moved, but because it was too late. Too late to repair what was broken. Too late to stitch together the torn pieces of trust. Too late to undo the silence, the nights alone, the cold glances, the empty bed. Too late for us. I folded the letter gently, wiped my tears, and placed it in my journal, the one I had been writing in since I left. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because I had said everything I needed to when I walked away. Some people think closure comes from reconciliation, but I've learned that sometimes closure comes from knowing you could go back, but choosing not to. It took me years to realize that love without respect is not love at all. Robert had loved me, maybe in his own way, but when it mattered most, when my body was weak and my spirit needed lifting, he wasn't there, and I would never forget that. But I also wouldn't carry the bitterness. I didn't want to grow old full of poison. I didn't want to become someone who looked back with only anger. So I forgave Jim in my heart, quietly, without ceremony. Forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about freeing myself from the weight of resentment. He never wrote again after that. I never expected him to. But a few weeks later, I ran into Lisa at the grocery store. We locked eyes. She looked down. She looked older, tired, worn. And you know what? I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel satisfaction either. I just felt done. I nodded politely. She walked away, and that was it. That was the final chapter I didn't know I needed. Back at home, I sat on my couch, wrapped in my favorite quilt, and whispered, "Thank you, God, for helping me survive it all." Because I had, not just the cancer, but the betrayal, the loss, the unraveling, and I hadn't just survived. They had rebuilt, piece by piece, heartache by heartache, and now I was stronger than ever. Not because of him, but in spite of him. Joy. It's such a small word, isn't it? 3 letters, 1 syllable. But for the longest time, it felt unreachable, like something reserved for other people. People whose lives hadn't been torn apart. People who hadn't looked in the mirror and seen a stranger staring back after months of chemo. People who hadn't felt their hearts crack wide open from betrayal. After Robert's letter. After seeing Lisa. After forgiving, but not forgetting Buff. Not forgetting I was left in this strange, in-between space. I wasn't sad anymore. Not in the I'll consume me, the way I used to be, but I also wasn't happy. I was healing, and healing is complicated. It's messy. It's not a straight line. It's more like a winding trail that sometimes loops back before moving forward. One morning, I woke up and noticed the sun filtering through the curtains. It was the same light that had streamed through the windows when I was at my lowest. But this time, it felt warmer, more like a promise. I got up, brewed a cup of tea instead of coffee, and stepped out into the garden. Emily had helped me plant roses, lavender, and even a little lemon tree in the corner. And for the first time, I noticed one of the buds had bloomed. Just one, but that was enough. It felt symbolic, this little flower blooming, in spite of all it had weathered. Just like me. That same week, Emily surprised me with a ticket to a pottery class. "Mom," she said, smiling, "you need to do something messy, something for you." I laughed. I hadn't made anything with my hands since I was in my 30s, but I went anyway, nervous, curious, a little skeptical, and I fell in love with the clay, the spinning wheel, the feeling of being covered in something that didn't care about my past or my scars. It just wanted to be shaped, molded, formed, much like me. That class became my weekly ritual. It was the one place where I didn't have to be strong, or wise, or even talkative. I just had to create. And somewhere in the middle of crooked bowls and lopsided mugs, I found something I thought I'd lost forever. Joy. Real joy. Not loud, not showy, but quiet, gentle, peaceful. The kind of joy that sneaks up on you in small moments. The way your hands move effortlessly over wet clay. The way the garden smells after a spring rain. The way your favorite blanket feels wrapped around you during an old movie. Joy that doesn't erase the pain but coexists with it. I started smiling again, not the forced kind, but the kind that bubbles up when you're laughing at a bad joke, or watching a child play with a puppy. And the best part, I started to dream again. not of going back, but of going forward. I imagined traveling just once, more maybe, to Italy, where my grandmother was born. I imagined writing a book, or at least a collection of essays for other women like me. I imagined speaking to young girls about self-worth, about resilience, about not giving your whole heart to someone who doesn't even know how to hold it. And those weren't just dreams, they became goals. I started volunteering once a week at a cancer recovery center. I'd sit with women in treatment, hold their hands, and simply say, "You're not alone." Because I had been there. I had been the one with the scarf over my head, the one staring at the wall while the Ford dripped slowly into my veins, that one pretending to be strong while screaming inside. And now, I could be someone else's proof that it gets better, not easier, but better. I even started writing again, my story, not just in a journal, but on a laptop. Emily helped me set up a blog. At first, I thought no one would read it, but they did, hundreds, then thousands. Thought women commented things like, "This is my story too," and you put into words what I couldn't even admit to myself. And that was the moment I realized, all of it, every ache, every tear, every moment I thought would break me had given me something powerful, a voice, a purpose, a way to turn pain into connection. I still have days when the past sneaks up on me, when a smell, or a song, or a quiet evening makes me remember what was lost. But I don't live there anymore. I don't live in the betrayal. I don't live in the hospital room. I don't live in the silence between two people who stopped loving each other a long time ago now. I live in the light, in the laughter of my grandchildren, in the clay between my fingers, in the gentle whisper of hope that visits me each morning. And that is joy. Hard-earned. Fierce, soft, real. Asterisk. If you've made it this far with me, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story, not just as a tale of heartbreak, but as a journey of rediscovery. Because this isn't just about what happened to me, this is about you. You, the woman sitting in silence after everyone else has gone to bed, you who stares at the wall wondering what you did wrong. You who gave everything, your love, your loyalty, your youth, and still ended up abandoned when you needed support the most. Let me tell you something, woman to woman, it wasn't your fault. You didn't deserve the betrayal. You didn't bring the pain on yourself. You weren't too much or not enough. You were just trusting, loving, real. And yes, he cheated. Yes, he walked away when you were at your weakest. Yes, he tore your heart into pieces with lies he told with a straight face. But that doesn't define you. You are more than the pain someone else caused. You are not the affair. You are not the diagnosis. You are not the moment he decided you were disposable. You are the woman who survived. You are the woman who kept breathing, even when it hurt to do so. You are the woman who now carries wisdom forged in fire. I've walked the path of devastation. I know the feeling of lying in bed next to someone who no longer loves you, pretending you don't notice their distance, their coldness, their emotional absence. I know how humiliating it is to be loyal to someone who didn't deserve your devotion. But I also know this: there is life after betrayal. There is love after heartbreak. There is you, though real, you still inside, waiting to be held, to be heard, to be chosen. And this time, you don't need someone else to choose you. You get to choose yourself. When I finally looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had weathered cancer, abandonment, and disappointment, was still standing, I knew I had won. Not because I got revenge, not because I made him regret what he did, but because I refused to let what broke me become what defined me. If you are still crying at night, if you are still wondering if you'll ever feel like yourself again, if you are still ashamed to say out loud what happened to you, let my voice echo what you can't say yet. You are not alone. There are millions of women just like you, brave women, hurting women, women healing in silence because they were taught to hold the family together no matter what it cost them. But I want to tell you, it's okay to let go. It's okay to walk away from someone who stopped walking with you long ago. It's okay to choose peace over performance. It's okay to start over. You owe no one your silence. You owe no one your suffering. But you do owe yourself love, softness, safety, freedom. You may not be ready yet. That's okay. Healing doesn't follow a schedule. But please, promise me something. Don't give up on yourself. Keep going even if all you do today is breathe. Keep going. Even if you're crying in the shower and forcing a smile at dinner. Keep going if you have no idea what tomorrow looks like. Because one day, one quiet, beautiful, ordinary day, You will feel joy again. You will laugh without guilt. You will dance without fear. You will wake up and realize you're not surviving anymore. You're living. That day is coming. I'm living proof of it. So to every woman listening, watching, or reading this, to every soul who's been shattered and stitched back together with grace, this is your reminder that your story isn't over. This is only the beginning of your new chapter. And you, my dear, you're going to write something beautiful. Asterisk, if my story touched your heart, if you saw even a piece of yourself in my journey, I invite you to do 3 things. Leave a comment and tell me your story. Your voice matters. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue building a safe space for women healing from betrayal, loss, and pain. Remember, healing doesn't happen alone. We heal together. You're not alone in your pain, and you never have to be again.